I'm Adam Moz, and this is Moz Models.
Welcome back to the channel. Today is March the 2nd, 2024, and yesterday afternoon, ETHOS 1.5 released. Finally, after a year of nightly testing, even longer of active development, we have finally gotten the biggest update that we have seen for ETHOS. So, I want to go through and just cover what's moved. Who moved the cheese? Moving the cheese is a term that a tech writer and photography writer that I followed for a number of years uses when he talks about changes in UI, where stuff shuffles around. It's not necessarily expected by the users. So ETHOS 1.5 moves the cheese. I think when you see what's been moved and where, you'll understand. There's also some significant changes to certain areas, and I'm just going to call them out. I'm not going to go into depth in this video. There will be other videos where we do go into depth on what the changes are. This is really, hey, you've just installed ETHOS 1.5. I used to go here for this. Why is it not there? It used to do this automatically. Why doesn't it? So, without further ado, I'm just going to load up a different model. So that hasn't changed. Let's just pick my Arrows Viper. This is a nice little one. SB, there's my SE. So that's my pre-flight, and let's zoom in. Because we don't really care in this one about what's going on with the controls, just what's going on in the OS. So we're going to bring up the models section. This is where a lot of the changes are. Now, this screen looks the same, because it is. But moving along, you'll notice there's not really a lot of changes in edit model. There are a few. You can see there's a tail type, model type, receiver. Now, this really is all about the stabilized receivers. And what this can do is for the listed receivers, and by the way, if you've got an Archer or Archer Pro series receiver, just pick S8R or S6R. They work pretty much the same, except you lose the panic on channel 12. They didn't populate because there's a lot of stuff in here, so get that fixed in the future. But as it is, you can just, for an Archer or Archer Pro S-Series receiver, so that's the Archer SR6, the Archer Pro SR8, and the Archer Pro SR10. Just pick S6R or S8R. They work exactly the same, except you don't get the panic mode on channel 12. Or sorry, I'm wrong on that. You still get the panic mode on channel 12. It's the self-check on channel 12 that goes away. Pardon me. But this exists because the wizard has changed a lot. And one of the things it can do now is pre-provision your mixes for the stabilized receivers. So it'll set up your gain, your flight modes, all those mixes. It'll set them up from the wizard. And moving down, you can set the S-port connector to give 5 volts. That's pretty cool. If you want to run something off of it, you just want to power something off of it, you can. That's the little servo connector that's on the back top of the radio you use for updating or for S-port mirroring. It can now give power as well. So if you bodged up a little dongle for PPM out off a receiver for a trainer mode, little hanging trainer mode dongle, you can now power that off the S-port connector, plug it into the trainer connector, and hey, it works. No having to steal power from the module bay. So that means you can do trainer with wireless and also run module-based RF. Flight modes, you're not going to see much change here. Really nothing changed. Mixes. The base mixes, nothing changed, but I'm going to call out 3 mixes that changed massively. First off, you are not going to see a VAR mix or a trim mix. They are gone. There is functionality that replaces them. It is better, but the mixes are gone. And today, if you wanted to do that mix, you're going to provision a free mix, and then you're going to use that instead. And I'll get into a little bit later where you are going to do the VAR and the trim piece. So free mixes, I'm just going to create one here because free mixes get actions. And actions are amazing because this means that you can actually build custom mixing, even sequencing, into the mix here. Now, if you add an action, and it's a weight action or an offset action, you can basically mimic a basic VAR mix in here. An offset, calling a trim function, is your trim mixer. Or you can just source the trim, use the source as the trimmer for trim mixer, or use the source as a VAR for a VAR mixer. Operations have not changed. Remember, lock is your replacement for OpenTX and EdgeTX overrides. It's better. Play with it a little, get used to it. It's way better than an override. Outside of that, not much has changed. You got multiple channels. You can reverse. You call the outputs for each, so you can reverse each channel in the mix. You do not have per channel curves. You need multiple curves per channel curves. You do need multiple mixes. Moving on, timers. Again, lots of changes here. I'm going to go in and edit them. The first page doesn't look too much, except you got a proportional timing source. So if you want to do one of those adjustable timers based on your throttle level or something else, you can do that. Your proportional timer source is what drives that. So for example, if you want to drive it off the throttle channel output instead of the throttle stick output, you can now do that. Persistent, that means does it save through model change cycles. Voice, this is a big one. You'll notice I can't select it because I just updated this radio to 1.5 and I haven't set my voices yet. Audio actions. This is where you can configure everything. There are no more baked-in minute calls or countdowns when you set voice. It's all an action. You can see this one has the countdown baked in. That's to mimic what I had set up. It will configure to work the same way as it was set up when you create it. Always check that, because if you've done something funky, there's a possibility it didn't convert 100% correctly. It'll be flyable, but it may not work exactly the way you expect because the functionality has changed so much. So you can add new audio action and countdown, beep, countdown, play file, play value. So you can actually have your countdown call out your battery state or your signal at a certain spot in your window where you always want to know it. Or you can have a countdown. You can use this as a timer, honestly, to call out telemetry values. That's pretty cool because now you don't have to do that necessarily in special functions. All your timing-based stuff is here. Or you can just do regular countdowns. Now the steps, haptic on and off, that's your buzz. But that's really it. This will let you do stuff like any real competition type countdown you want. Trims. So, a couple things I want to call out. First off, you got your range, you got your step, and you'll notice that hasn't changed too much. You got easy mode, independent per flight mode. Easy mode is your regular. Your trim just trims it all the time. Independent per flight mode is the checkbox that used to be in 1.4 and earlier. Custom is OpenTX behavior plus plus. And the reason I say that is OpenTX has incredibly powerful trims. You can have trims that reference other trims with offsets that just reference other trims. And this is all based on flight model. In Ethos, it's based on anything you can select. You can have trims that are not based on flight model, like independent trim value that's not based on flight mode. So if you wanted to have, you got your flight modes all set up and you want a separate trim for when your gear's down, you can build a logic switch that says this flight mode gear down, this flight mode is this trim. This flight mode gear up, everything works normally. Gear down, you get a different set of trims. Build all that in. It's incredibly powerful. That's a video in and of itself. Moving down, trim aileron, you know I got my 5.6. Add an extra trim. This is the replacement for trim mixers. And it's better than trim mixers because you get all of the configurability of trim per flight mode trims, which were painful to do in trim mixers because you had to make a mixer for each flight mode. You got your steps, you got your up down, which is any momentary, you've got a name. So you can convert your any pair of momentary actions to trims, to trimmer type function. And by the way, they do, when you hold them down, they do accelerate like a regular trim. Moving down, instant trim. That is a condition. You pull it, it writes your trims to your stick position to your trims in flight. It's great in maidens. Be very, very careful if you're not maidening it because you can screw up your trim horribly. If, say, for example, you're doing a Lomchevac and you accidentally pull that button, your trims are going to be unflyable. Set that up, maiden it, set the trims, turn it back off. Move trims to sub-trims. A little simple button here. Hit the button, it saves your current trim position to your sub-trims. That's a big one. Because now you can write to your sub-trims, your trims will zero out, and your plane is set up. That's what you do. You go up, you maiden, you hit instant trim, you come back, you land, move to trims to sub-trims, all your trims are zeroed out now. And your airplane is still in trim, and you've compensated for all that stuff that you couldn't quite get mechanically. So don't quote me on this, but I believe you can build 6 extra trim functions. RF system, I'll be honest, there's been a little bit of move the cheese here, but it's just layout. It's not functionality. We just moved the layout, moved a few things around a little bit to make the layout a little bit more intuitive, a little bit easier, a little bit harder to hit the wrong button. You can see this is just an access model. So you got your 3 receivers here. And then you get options, bind, and let's go there. Bind and clear if you want to clear that out of there. Moving over here, there's bigger changes. Telemetry, largely the same. A few more options in there, a little bit more configurability, nothing much has changed. Checklist. This looks a lot the same. There is a new feature in checklist. If you put a model file, a text file, with the same name as the model file name, it will display the text in your checklist window, so you can have a little bit of info on the model there. You can also do that if you want formatting. You can use a markdown file. It has to have the .md suffix, plain text with markdown markup. Yes, that's interesting language, but markdown is a very simple way of setting stuff to bold, italic, different font sizes. Only the basic markdown settings are supported, but then you can have the name of the model in bold and big font, and some information with some headers and all that. That's supported in checklist. Logic switches, not much changed. Special functions. Big change here. Play value, play track, gone. They're replaced by play audio. And play audio, again, what you're going to see here, you have the voice call out, and it's empty because I have not configured my voices yet. We'll get to that later in the video. You can make them global, you can repeat, you can skip on startup, you can build a there's a reset button because you can build a sequence and step through a sequence. Do you want a caller for your F3A practice? Yes, this can do that. You can build all your callouts in here so they go through it in sequence with pauses. And you can actually build that out so it'll call out a set every so often. Very complex, very powerful. Again, that's a whole video in and of itself, and we will get there. Curves. Very small change in curves, but it's huge. So we go into the curve. It looks a whole lot like the standard curve. It's smooth. You got easy mode, and easy mode, just by the way, means that your x-axis, your values across here, are evenly spaced automatically. Offset just lets you adjust that. Note the hamburger. Yes, offset can be live adjust. If you want a curve that you adjust kind of the gain on the whole across the whole curve, trim function and offset. Points. Hamburger. You can use a source. You can live adjust any point in a curve as you fly. I will be doing videos on this. In fact, the first thing I'm going to do is how to abuse this to give yourself idle trim using a var and a live adjusting point. So you want a high idle, you don't want to waste flight modes on it. It just got way easier because you got a throttle curve, 2-point throttle curve, 0.2 is 100%, 0.1 is use a source, and it can be a trim function or it can be a var. And yeah, you can do this all in the trim function because, again, your trim function isn't tied to flight modes. It will do flight mode based values, but it can do anything based values. So we'll go through the two in a later video. It's coming very soon. This will probably be the first one I do on how to do selectable idle points using this new feature. You can also set it up. You'll need to use logic switches to pick out which point you're setting, but you can do this to basically set up an in-flight adjustable flap to elevator mix that is curved. It's not a one-to-one, it's curved, so when you've on the spoiler stick, you get linear response across that, despite the fact your pitch influence from your flaps is non-linear, and you can adjust it live in the sky. The only way you've been able to do this before is a Lewis script, available for OpenTX and EdgeTX, as well as for Jetty. Based on the work of Mike Shalim, he did it in OpenTX first. Now you can do it in ETHOS, and you don't need any additional scripts. That is going to make a whole lot of in-flight tuning a whole lot easier, but it'll make the programming more difficult first. VARs. Big change number 1. This is the replacement for the OpenTX GVAR as well as the VAR mixer. It's far more powerful than either. Compared to a GVAR, you've got more adjustability, more values, more of them, 64 instead of 9, and you're much less limited in where you can apply them because ETHOS makes much heavier use of source assignments in adjustable fields, and they're not tied to flight modes. Their flight modes are selectable for multiple lines, but like the VAR mix, you're not tied to a flight mode. So that means you can use your flight modes for flight modes and then set up overrides in certain spots. Kind of like I mentioned with trims. You can have certain conditions that don't trigger their own flight mode, but do trigger a different trim, a different VAR, a different throttle curve. Now, there are really two real configurable options here. The range is just the max and minimum range that VAR can have. If you want to use a VAR to adjust a rate, you're going to set that, say, your min to 50, your max to 80, and then you can use this to adjust your rate within that constraint, so you can never generate an unsafe value. Your values are all your selectable values. So you got one default, and again, any valid true false can select another value. They are, as usual, a priority stack, so you got default and then top one active wins. And then you have actions. Actions have a value, they've got a function, so you can assign. You want to write a value to the var. You can add, you can subtract, you can multiply, you can divide, percent, min, max, and you can repurpose trim. X20 users, you can now borrow your trims. So you want an adjuster, you put it in that mode, it steals the trim away while it's active. You're adjusting, say, your throttle trim or your rudder trim, my two favorite ones to repurpose. You can now temporarily borrow them. I will note that any active VAR that has that repurpose trim will adjust at the same time. So you can set two active and tweak them with one trimmer. It's incredibly powerful, and it makes your trims so more useful, because now you can borrow them only when you need them to adjust something, and then when you flip that off, they go back to doing whatever they were doing normally. The one thing I will note you cannot do, we had this in early builds of 1.5, but took it away because it was causing some folks some serious grief. You can't have one repurpose override another repurpose. It's either repurposed and anything listening to that trim is getting adjusted, any VAR, I should say, listening to that trim is getting adjusted, or it's not repurposed and anything normally listening to that trim is getting adjusted. Moving on, trainer gets a few updates, and they're mostly here. S-Bus external module, CPPM external module. You can plug a module into the bay like an FWTM Lite or a linker module, and you can get trainer input that way. S-Bus external module, 16-channel trainer, finally. Big scale guys, FWTMs are your friend. Bluetooth trainer cable are the usual ones. There's not a lot of other changes here. It's the same basic trainer mode, but now you don't need any extra cables for an FWTM. You don't need to bodge anything together if you're not using external RF. Lua gets moved in here. Lua sources, fully configurable. This is for Lua sources, mixer scripts, that sort of thing. Moving over here. File Manager. This gets a bunch of new features around Bluetooth file transfer. You can now transfer files and other stuff from one radio to another over Bluetooth. You don't need anything else. There will be a video on that. Alerts, date and time, general. And we're going to go in here because audio changed. Now, there's a lot of resources online about the new audio file layout, because you can have up to 3 voices in here, and you got to select them. So I'll just go and pick my US, and my default voice 2 is my Great Britain. Those are 2 folders. One is audio/en. So your voice is now in audio/language/ the audio file name, or the voice name. And then system callouts are in the system folder under that. So this first voice is /audio/en/us. All my custom voices are in there. And then /system, all my system voices are in there. Yes, you can have multiple system voices. If you pick a different voice than your main, or if you pick a different voice for your audio or for anything where you're playing a value, you have to have system folder populated because it's going to try and play out of that. This is really useful. I just converted my X18 over to 2 sprung sticks for surface use. I can now go in there and have a car voice in there that's got all my car stuff. I'll be setting it up really. Eventually, there's going to be a main one. I'm going to have a power one. I'm going to have a sailplane one on this, just so that I can optimize my voice selection so I'm not scrolling through 35 billion voice files to get where I was going. That's the big advantage for voices for me. Some other folks may want to have literally different voices. Same set of audio files, it speaks differently. Some people may want to actually bake in some other languages. If your English is a second language, but you leave the radio in English, you can have some voice callouts in your language of choice, for custom voice, even for system voice, as long as the file name is correct, and then have your UI still in English. Bluetooth on and off, that's moved in here. There's not the storage location because this is an X20 Pro. Select model at power on. That's been around for a while. USB mode pre-selection, that's been around for a while. Moving on. Device config is in here now, where it bloody well belongs. This is still the old device config, except the remote NFC has been added. There are going to be updates for the new stabilizers. As far as I'm aware, they are not in here yet. So this is exactly what that hasn't changed. But the new RBs, the new stabilizers will get added to device config. That's going to come at a later date, hopefully pretty soon, but not right away. Moving over. Info is here. See, I've got a bunch of Lua. But you notice what I did not have. There's no real wireless menu. So we're going to go turn Bluetooth on. And that's my Bluetooth speaker in here in general with the rest of the audio settings. The other stuff is going to be where it belongs. Bluetooth telemetry is now in Telemetry. Trainer is now set Bluetooth. And yes, this is all there. Connect last device will reconnect to that trainer one, but just use an FWTM module. If you're going to do any training seriously, you will find it. Para is a good system, don't get me wrong. It's limited. It's got two things. It's limited date channels and doesn't reconnect automatically. FWTM is simply better, but Para is already pretty good. If you want the Spectrum experience, you really want an FWTM though, because it just binds up to any Access or ACC ST D16 V2 radio out of the box. You plug it in, you set your module over here to S-Bus external module, and you're good to go. In fact, you can clip, what I do is I actually just clip the module into the back of my X9 Lite, which is my trainee radio, and then when I want to train, I pop that module out, plug it in here, I'm good to go. And that is all the big stuff. There's a ton of other stuff in 1.5. That's the big stuff. That's where the cheese is moved. These are the first things you're going to want to check when you update to 1.5. So, folks, welcome to the new world. I think it's going to be a great run. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy 1.5.